In 1894, something was moving through the French countryside. It wore a white rabbit fur hat, it carried an accordion, and for 3 years nobody could catch it. Today we're talking about Joseph Vacher, a man who killed twice as many people as Jack the Ripper, whose case gave birth to modern forensic science, and who was only caught because a farmer's wife refused to die. Part 1. Where he came from. To understand what Vacher became, we have to start at the beginning. He was born on the 16th of November 1869 in Beaufort, a small, poor commune in the French Alps. He was the 15th child of 16. His father was 59 when Joseph was born. His mother was 44. Both were already exhausted by poverty and by children. The 15th child doesn't get much attention. Joseph Vacher got almost none. He had a twin brother named Eugène. Eugène died at 8 months old, choking on a piece of bread in the cradle. Joseph grew up with an empty space beside him. At 6 years old, Vacher was violated by the local constable, a figure of authority in the commune. Nobody spoke of it. There was no language for it. The world moved on. And Joseph Vacher grew up volatile, isolated, and certain that the world owed him something it was refusing to give. Part 2. The warnings nobody heeded. The signs were there from the beginning. As a boy, when other kids mocked him, which they did constantly because he was poor and strange and explosive, he went home to get his father's rifle and shot at them. He tried to strangle his younger brother Louis for pushing a wheelbarrow too slowly. At 15, his family sent him to strict Catholic school run by the Maris brothers. They expelled him after 2 months, their official reason written in the school record, torturing animals. After that came a string of fresh starts that all ended the same way. He found work at a restaurant, contracted syphilis, had a testicle surgically removed, moved in with his sister and her husband who threw him out for aggressive behavior. Then, at 18, he attacked a 12-year-old boy on a farm. The boy fought back, punched him, ran to the other workers. Vacher fled. His employers had no record of where he lived. Nobody came. He crossed into Switzerland and went to his brother Auguste in Geneva. He told Auguste what he had done. Auguste put him out on the street. Back in France, in Lyon, he was committed to an asylum for persecutory delusions and then released. 6 years old to 22, violated, violent, expelled, evicted by everyone who knew him, charged with nothing, stopped by no one. Every door that should have held him was left open. And then, in 1892, he joined the army. Part 3. The Soldier. In the army, Vacher finally found a world that matched how he saw himself. A world where worth was official, written on your sleeve, measurable. He had real ability. He could read, write, calculate, wrestle. He rose to sergeant. But even here, the pattern continued. Early in his service, he was transferred from his quarters because he'd been stealing the clothes of fellow soldiers. Not to sell, not to wear. He hid them. Nobody could explain why. Nobody tried very hard. They just moved him to a different place. He attacked superiors. He was insubordinate. Each incident was noted, filed, and forgotten. Then, convinced promotion was coming too slowly, he slashed his own throat with a razor. His superiors promoted him to sergeant. The army did what every institution before it had done. It moved him along. And on a drizzly evening in 1893, on a riverside promenade in Besançon, he fell into step beside a young woman. Part 4. Louise. Her name was Louise Baron. She was 19 years old. She came from Baume-les-Dames, near the Swiss border, a quiet town where the river runs cold between limestone cliffs. She was working in Besançon as a maidservant. That evening, Vacher made a comment about the weather. She answered. They walked, talked, shared a dinner in a cafe. The most ordinary evening imaginable. After one dinner, he proposed marriage. In the same breath, he told her he would kill her if she ever betrayed him. She declined and tried to disappear from his world. He stalked her at work. He tried to move in with her and her parents. When she went back to her mother in Baume-les-Dames, the love letters followed her there. He became privately convinced she was involved with his best friend, a fellow soldier named Louis Loyonnet. She went to a dance with him, hoping civility. The moment another man spoke to her, Vacher lunged at him. Louise didn't wait to see what happened next. She fled. She sent one final letter. It would be best if you stopped writing to me. Everything is finished between us. I do not love you. Adieu, Louise. The day before the shooting, he grabbed her from behind with a kitchen knife, shouting, "As good as today as tomorrow." He fled when he heard someone approaching. The next morning, the 25th of June, 1893, he bought a revolver and ammunition. He walked to her lodgings. When she opened the door, he told her to either accept his proposal or return his letters and gifts. Before she could answer, he shot her 3 times in the head. She fell. Then he turned the gun on himself and fired twice into his own skull. It was his second suicide attempt. This time, something was different. This time he survived with a bullet in his head, and the violence would never turn inward again. The cartridges had been loaded at half charge. Neither shot was fatal. Louise survived, badly wounded, 2 teeth shattered, her jaw torn. Vacher's wounds were permanent. 1 bullet lodged so deep behind his right ear that no surgeon could safely remove it. It stayed there for the rest of his life. His face was transformed, right side paralyzed, eye weeping constantly, cheek moving in ways a face should not move. And Louise? History does not tell us what became of her. After the incident, she steps quietly out of every record. Part 5. The Asylum and the Release. Vacher was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to the Saint-Élie hospital in Dole. He attacked staff, destroyed furniture, escaped twice, once by throwing himself from the window of a moving train, disappearing for 2 days before being found bleeding in a field. He wrote elaborate letters to government officials demanding his release. After 9 months, the doctors at Saint-Robert Hospital declared him completely cured. They signed his release papers. April's Fool's Day. Joseph Vacher, with a bullet still in his skull, with half his face paralyzed, with a file of incidents stretching back to childhood, walked out into the French countryside. He was 24 years old. He was not cured. Part 6. The Names. Over the next 3 years, Vacher murdered at least 11 people across the fields and forests of rural France, possibly as many as 50. They were not famous, they were not powerful. They were children working alone in the fields at dawn, and one elderly woman alone in her farmhouse. They deserve to be named. Eugénie Delhomme, 21, factory worker, May 1894. Louise Marcel, 13, shepherdess, November 1894. Augustine Mortureux, 17, farm worker, May 1895. Claudius Beaupied, 12, shepherd boy, May 1895. Péronne Moreau, 68, alone in her farmhouse, August 1895. Victor Portalier, 16, shepherd, August 1895. Pierre Massot-Pellet, 14, shepherd boy, September 1895. Aline Allez, 16, farm girl, September 1895. Marie Lorue, 19, farm worker, September 1896. Rosine Rodier, 14, shepherd girl, October 1896. Pierre Laurent, 14, shepherd boy, June 1897. The youngest was 12. They saw a wandering stranger approaching across the grass. Maybe he was playing his accordion. Maybe he asked for water or bread or directions. They had no reason to be afraid. Part 7. The Wanderer and the Map. After his release, Vacher walked village to village, department to department, sometimes 20 miles a day, sleeping in barns, begging at farmhouse doors, working the occasional day's labor on a farm. He was impossible to miss, disfigured face, white rabbit fur hat, accordion on his back, and yet somehow impossible to catch. Here's why. In 1894, France had no national police communication network. When a shepherd boy was murdered in the Isère investigated locally. When a farm girl was killed near Dijon, Dijon handled it locally. Nobody was connecting the dots. Vacher crossed department boundaries constantly. He had no address, no fixed community, no thread to follow. The French press called him le tueur de bergers, the killer of shepherds. But without a name or a face to attach to the murders, the terror remained shapeless. Until a magistrate named Émile Fourquet decided to do something nobody had ever done before in France. Fourquet wrote letters, dozens of them, to gendarmerie across 20 departments. He gathered every report of murdered young people in rural areas going back years, and then he drew a map. Every murder, every attack, every sighting of a scarred vagrant with a white hat and an accordion. The pattern was unmistakable. One man moving in great loops across rural France, always targeting those who worked alone, always moving on before anyone thought to look. What Fourquet had built from pen, paper, and sheer determination was the first criminal profile in French history. He took it to Alexandre Lacassagne, professor of forensic medicine at the University of Lyon, and arguably the most important criminologist in the world at that moment. Lacassagne had spent decades building the tools of modern criminal investigation: blood-stain pattern analysis, bullet striation matching, time of death calculation. His student, Edmond Locard, would go on to establish the world's first forensic laboratory and articulate the principle that underpins every criminal investigation on Earth today. Every contact leaves a trace. Lacassagne had a saying he gave his students: every society gets the kind of criminal it deserves. He was about to prove it. Part 8. The Capture and the Trial. On the 4th of August 1897, in a forest near Champy in the Ardèche, a woman named Marie Hérault was collecting pine cones. Then Vacher appeared. She screamed, long, sustained, carrying across the hillside. Her husband came running, her children followed. Neighbors arrived. Together, they pelted Vacher with stones, knocked him down, and locked him in a shed at the nearest inn. They guarded him for 6 hours until the police arrived. He was arrested on the charge of assault, but a local magistrate looked at the prisoner, the disfigured face, the white hat, the accordion, and wrote immediately to Fourquet. Fourquet had his man. After weeks of interrogation, Vacher confessed, not reluctantly, not with remorse, with vanity. He demanded the confession be published in France's leading newspapers. He wanted to be famous. He signed it at the top: Dieu, droit, devoir. God, rights, obligations. And his message to France: so much the worse for you if you think I'm responsible. The trial was chaos. Vacher arrived wearing his white rabbit fur hat, wild beard, claw-like fingernails. As the charges were read, the names, the ages, the places, he drew one finger slowly across his throat. He claimed insanity. A rabid dog had corrupted his blood, he said, or God has sent him. The story changed. But Lacassagne dismantled every version. He demonstrated that every murder showed preparation, every killing showed calculation. After one murder, Vacher had been stopped by a gendarme on a bicyclette searching for a killer in the area. Vacher looked him in the eye, told him he'd seen a suspicious figure running east and pointing in the wrong direction. The gendarme thanked him and rode away. That, Lacassagne told the jury, was not madness. That was control. Guilty. Death. Part 9. The Last Morning. The 31st of December 1898, New Year's Eve, the last day of the year. At 6:15 in the morning, the prison director told Vacher his pardon had been refused. He refused to walk to the guillotine. He had to be carried, dragged by the executioners across the courtyard, struggling every step of the way. Outside, 3,500 people had gathered in the winter dark to watch. His last words: "You are committing another crime. I am the great victim. Fin de siècle." At 7:03 in the morning, Joseph Vacher was executed. He was 29 years old. After the guillotine fell, the scientist moved in. His brain was removed, divided, and distributed among the leading anatomists of the age, each taking a section to study independently. They argued furiously. One found signs of syphilis, another found nothing abnormal at all. The great Cesare Lombroso announced he had found all the hallmarks of a born criminal, only for a colleague to point out that Lombroso had never actually examined the brain. He had seen an impression of it. No consensus was ever reached, and the bullet, the one behind his right ear since June 1893, was finally removed. Too late to answer the question it raised. Was he born this way, made this way, or changed in a fraction of a second by a piece of metal lodged in exactly the wrong place? His brain remains to this day in the Faculty of Medicine in Paris, still in its jar, still waiting. Epilogue. what he left behind. Here's the thing about Joseph Vacher that I find most extraordinary. He terrorized France for 3 years. He killed children in fields. He was a monster by any measure. And yet what he left behind, entirely by accident, was a revolution. Fourquet's map became the blueprint for criminal profiling. The idea that you can track a killer through a pattern and behavior before you ever have physical evidence, that was born in a magistrate's office in Lyon in 1897. Lacassaigne's forensic methods, bloodstain analysis, ballistics, time of death, became the foundation of modern criminal science. His student Locard went on to establish the world's first forensic laboratory. And Lacassaigne's proposal after the trial, a national database of unsolved crimes shared across all départements, contributed to the formation of the International Police Commission in 1923. Renamed Interpol in 1956, 195 member countries today. Every forensic lab on Earth, every criminal profile ever drawn up, every piece of evidence presented in every court in the world, it all traces back in part to one scarred vagrant with a white rabbit fur hat and an accordion walking through the French countryside in 1894. Their names deserve to be remembered. Now you know them. If you're new here, welcome to The Fracture. Every episode we ask the same question, not just what happened, but why, what made them, where the fracture was. Next time, we're leaving rural France and going to the most glamorous address in the world, Versailles, 1677, where the Sun King sits on his throne, and somewhere beneath his court, witches are selling poison to noble women, and the most powerful people in France are dying one by one. If that sounds like your kind of story, subscribe because you won't want to miss it.